Hey all, Angry Spork here with episode 10 of Young Justice Season 3, entitled Exceptional Human Beings. I'm sure there's a snarky remark I can make with that title, but moving on. So it starts out with Batman. He's flying to Santa Prisca with Metamorpho and Katana. And there's a unique use of Metamorpho's powers as they drop in, like he's softening their fall, he's making sure they don't go splat, and it's done very well. And they manage to do all this getting past the automated security. We jump to Star Labs Detroit, where Dr. Stone, voiced by Carrie Payton, is working on one of his science things. His son Victor calls, reminding him about a big game that night, and his pappy says he'll be there, but, kinda doubtful. And he has to cut the call short because he's getting a call from Steel about the father box. And, Steel warning him how dangerous it can be and how it can repair both apocalyptic tech and parademons. And this is, a warning. It's a warning. But there is a good line here about technology not being inherently good or bad. It's how you use it, which is something that really, it's something that kind of gets overlooked in some stories. Maybe they don't necessarily say that the technology is bad, but the person behind the technology was bad, the company behind the technology was bad. And it's something of a cliche. So it's nice to see this show, point out something very, very true. So we jump back to the jungle, and Metamorpho, he basically fakes a fart so that a couple of guards will be so distracted arguing about it that he and Katana, who have broken off from Batman, evade them. And he takes the form of a wastebasket that Katana hides in. He even takes the form of a piece of goo that is mistaken for poop, I guess. It was a rather large puddle of goop. So I don't know what animal the guards thought made that. And I don't want to know. And interestingly enough, they're all speaking English. Not particularly accented English either. So, and Santa Prisca is supposed to be like in a South American region, if I'm not mistaken. So, not a huge thing, just I would have expected an accent or two in there. So we go to Happy Harbor, and there's an amorous moment with Connor and Megan, and then we see Nightwing training Halo, Forager, and Geo-Force. Nice touch that Forager's shell hasn't fully grown back from when he was being attacked by Lobo, and he had to molt. They have a moment between Halo and Geo-Force that's obviously romantic in subtext. It's not overly subtle, especially if you've watched as much TV as I have. And there's an accidental burn that occurs between them. Dr. Jace is talking to Jefferson Pierce again. They're also close, obviously, and she's elaborating about her "my kids" moment from the Lobo attack, and how she just wants what's best for the kids as she watches them train. Now, while I like that she has that familial attachment to them, again, I watched Black Lightning. That's such a drastically different Jace, and I'm not familiar with the character, so I guess she's got to be in the comics, otherwise this is a wacky coincidence. So I'm wondering, which of these two versions of Helga Jace is more accurate to the comics? Because if it's the one on the live-action Black Lightning show, then maybe the animated one's going to have a little breakdown? Maybe? I don't know. But I don't want to, look into the character, because then I might get spoiled. Or, maybe she's like a villain in the comics and in Black Lightning, and Weissman decided, hey, we're gonna just make her more of a protagonist. Just to change things up. I mean, that's kind of what they do with Amazo in Justice League Unlimited. So, not outside the realm of possibility. Anyway, back in Santa Prisca, Katana and Morpho see Shiva as she watches over some shadow ninjas going through their paces, and Oracle warns them that she's the most dangerous woman alive, so don't get seen by her. But Shiva picks one female student out of the group, tells them to, be off or whatever, and tells the one student to follow her. And the two heroes are following them. They see in the near distance a mountain with a complex built kind of inside it. I can't describe it very well, but it's one of those type of villain layers. And they stay put as Batman is already inside, undetected, because Batman. Back to the quarry, and training is complete, but Brion is still moody because he's training instead of finding his sister. And Nightwing says that he's doing what's best for both him and Tara, and, asks, "Do you trust me?" Kind of an important question. So Deathstroke arrives, meets with Shiva, and turns out that student she picked out was Cassandra Savage. And she happens to ask what happened to her roommate, Markov. Dun dun dun! And Slade said she washed out, but Granny may find use for her, and Cassandra should avoid getting too attached to her fellow agents, especially if she's going to follow this kind of life. So she excuses herself. Shiva and Slade talk, and we get some conversational exposition about how Slade is a new member to the Light and the new leader of the Shadows, while Shiva is training the League of Shadows, and she's the new Light's new enforcer, which I guess Slade was in the previous season. So we jump to a high school locker room where Victor Stone is getting ready for the game, while his teammates are, talking about, "Oh man, I'd love to date this superhero. I'd love to date this superhero." And of course, one of those other teammates is voiced by Carrie Payton, who's done a lot of voices this season. And of course, he has to let out a booyah. Because, he gotta. I mean, it made more sense here than it did in Justice League. And I don't hate that movie as much as most people do. So they push around this kid they call Cisco, and who maybe it's supposed to be Vibe, like from The Flash. And Vic, most of the times there'd be like one jock dude who's like, "Hey man, leave him alone," or something like. But Vic, he doesn't like join in, but he doesn't stop it either. He just kind of like brushes it off and walks away. So, yeah. I'm not good on the whole D&D role placement thing, but is that a chaotic neutral or just being a jerk? So Batman and his two operatives have the information they need, and Oracle directs them to the rendezvous point to get off the island. However, their escape boat has Bane aboard, and he, of course, challenges Batman. And I notice, and he mentions shortly after this point that he no longer relies on Venom. It looked like he had face paint on, but I guess he always did. I thought he maybe had a mask early in the series, but maybe I'm remembering wrong. I really should have watched those first two seasons first. I've never really liked the whole thing with Bane showing his lips, which I guess is still a bit in line with the whole luchador look he's always kind of sported, but I guess I just prefer the comics version where it's just like one full mask over his entire face. Anyway, Artemis is enrolling Violet into high school, filling out the paperwork, and says like she's going to need a surname. Violet is still very much against using her given name, so they settle on Harper, Will's surname. He excuses himself while they're all eating ice cream, and that's a lot of, Violet had 4 or 5 big old scoops in her bowl. I'm like, that seems a little excessive. That was a pretty big bowl, too. But anyway, Will excuses himself, goes outside, and he finds Cheshire, or Cheshire, however you want to pronounce it. I've pronounced it different ways myself. Her arm is still in a sling from being shot, and of course she was, watching from afar to check in on her daughter in her own little way. And Will says, it's okay, you can stay here, you can be a mother to your child. And she's like, no, I tried that, it didn't work. And she feels like they're both better off without her. And this was about saying goodbye in her own way, so she leaves. Now that does kind of make me wonder, is, Will Harper going to keep pining for Cheshire, or is he going to try and find consolation in the other Croc daughter? Who knows? Honestly, I hope they don't try that, or at least it's like, because again, I don't feel there's any real chemistry between these two characters, but that's hardly stopped some people before. Back to the fight in Santa Prisca, Katana and Metamorpho are on their way. They're about to intervene, but Slade and Shiva arrive. And Shiva and Katana square off, and there's a hint that they have a history. Shiva doesn't exactly specify that Katana's sword can steal the souls of its victims, but, she does note how it's a superior sword unto itself. And of course that leaves Metamorpho tangoing with Slade. And there's some good insight on him, on Metamorpho, and the fights themselves are very well done. Since the cover is blown and subtlety thrown out the window, it's eventually settled that the Batplane just comes back, flies by, and fires on Bane's weapons, icing on the cake as they make their escape. I didn't really intend that to rhyme, but, it happens. So a little later, Vic's team has won the game, and they're celebrating at a local diner, and of course, Victor's dad was a no-show. But, maybe a little silver lining, he did get scouted by a Metropolis University coach, and at the same time, Hal Jordan has stopped by Star Labs Detroit and I can see there's some of the skunk stripes on his temples, which that's what I associate a lot with Hal Jordan's. I think that was because I didn't read a lot of comics before he turned into Parallax. But the few times I did see him, those skunk stripes were kind of present, so it's he was a little older, but he wasn't decrepit, and so it was a sign of maturity, but nothing too drastic. Whereas, looking back, Jeff Johns saying that it was a result of Parallax infecting him, and the white hair along the side of his head was a sign of the growing fear. So okay, at first I thought that was a little clever, but then I never really looked into if that was something that happens in real life, if you're so fearful and stressed and so forth, your hair turns white. But looking back now, it's that was an excuse to make him look younger, because some people working in the comic industry are just frightened to death of these characters aging even a day. But that was a tangent. Apologies. So Hal's there. He drops off a father box for Doc Stone. This isn't Back to the Future. Why do you think it's Back to the Future? I didn't say it was Back to the Future. Yes, we did. No, I didn't. Yes, we did. No, I didn't. You made this awkward. You make this awkward. The weird thing is we're both right. And the credits roll over Artemis's dog, whose name I still forget, while he's enjoying some of his dog food. Now, this was a nice progression of, the side story about Tara. Got some good action in there. and looks like the development of Cyborg. This seems to be in keeping with what little I know about the character from the comics, that he, he was a sports star, and I don't know if the quarrels with his dad were that big a thing, or if they were a thing at all before, like, the New 52, because I know, like, Barry Allen, he did not have this tragic dead mother backstory where some time traveler killed his mom and his dad was accused and he died in prison and all these things. It's like, that was not a thing until it was later retconned. I don't think, not by the New 52, but I think it was before then. Because, Flashpoint had to happen. He was a forensic scientist. He was struck by lightning and the chemicals and the flash powers and the speed force, and he just did the right thing with those powers. He didn't need to be driven by some horrific tragedy. He just did the right thing, which seems to be something comic writers today don't understand. That you don't need a frigging horror story as an origin to learn to do the right thing. It's not a bad way to get the hero to realize what's right and wrong, but doing it with every hero is just excessive and monotonous. Got some insights on some characters, even if it was like a bit of dialogue from Metamorpho saying he's in constant pain, but he works through it, he adapts. Even that was nice. Another good episode. They continue to give you as much information as they feel you need, and they don't, they leave you wanting more, but they don't disappoint. Not as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, I'll see you next week.